the story of the NBA player who disappeared. The story of Bison Dell remains one of the most haunting mysteries in the history of professional sports. Born Brian Williams, he was a gifted athlete who rose through the basketball ranks, eventually making a name for himself at the University of Arizona before entering the National Basketball Association in the early 1990s. Drafted in the first round of the 1991 NBA draft by the Orlando Magic, Williams had a solid if somewhat nomadic career, moving between several teams. His most notable moment came during the 1996 to 1997 season when he was signed by the Chicago Bulls for the last 9 games. Though his tenure was short, he became an important part of the team's rotation as they went on to secure their 5th championship under Michael Jordan's leadership. Afterward, Williams was traded to the Detroit Pistons. During this period, he embraced his Cherokee heritage and changed his name to Bison Dell. He was known not only for his athletic skill, but also for his eccentric and free-spirited personality. At the time, he was one of the Pistons' highest-paid players, with a lucrative contract that promised many more years in the league. Yet, in a decision that shocked fans and analysts alike, Daly retired in 1999 at only 30 years old, walking away from more than $36 million still owed to him. At the peak of his career, he chose instead to live life on his own terms, a choice that made him admired. Following his retirement, Dale pursued a life of adventure. He traveled extensively, explored the world, and eventually bought a boat that he named the Hakuna Matata, meaning good times. It was on this vessel that his story would take its most tragic and mysterious turn. On the 6th of July in the year 2002, Dell set sail from Tahiti with his girlfriend Serena Carlin, his brother Miles DeBoard, and a hired captain. The group left the island with no indication that anything unusual would occur. 2 weeks later, on the 20th of July, the Hakuna Matata returned to Tahiti. This time, however, Miles DeBoard was the only one aboard. Dele, Carlin, and the captain had vanished without explanation. Alarm bells rang soon after when DeBoard began making suspicious financial transactions using his brother's identity. On the 5th of September, authorities in Arizona discovered that DeBoard had purchased more than $150,000 worth of gold by using Dale's name, passport, and signature. Just days earlier, the Hakuna Matata had been found with its nameplate removed and patches covering what appeared to be bullet holes. This disturbing discovery deepened the mystery, raising questions about what had truly taken place at sea. On the same day, DeBoard made a phone call to his mother, insisting that he would never harm Bison and expressing despair about his own future. Authorities from both the United States and France worked together to investigate, and the conclusion they reached was chilling. The evidence suggested that Dell, Carlin, and the captain likely perished at sea, their bodies disposed of in the vast and unforgiving Pacific Ocean. Such a fate meant that recovery would be nearly impossible, leaving the families of those involved without closure. The opportunity to fully question DeBoard never came. Shortly after being taken into custody, he experienced a medical emergency after an overdose of insulin and slipped into a coma. He passed away in a California hospital on the 27th of September, 2002. With his passing, the last person who could have revealed the truth about what happened aboard the Hakuna Matata was gone. The strange case of Mamie Connor Lahun. Mamie Connor Lahun's story remains one of the great unsolved mysteries in the world of athletics. In 2014, at just 24 years of age, she had risen to become Sierra Leone's brightest long-distance running star. Her determination and raw talent carried her to the London Marathon, where she stunned the sporting community by finishing in 20th place. It was a remarkable achievement for an athlete so young and from a country with limited resources for training and international competition. Many believed that this performance would be the beginning of a long and celebrated career on the world stage. Yet, what should have been the moment of her coronation became the moment she vanished without explanation. After crossing the finish line in London, Mamie was expected to reunite with her team and prepare for the celebrations that often follow such an accomplishment. Instead, she disappeared into the city with no money, no passport, and no belongings other than the running gear she wore. Officials were baffled. A marathon finish of that quality usually secures sponsorships, invitations, and international recognition. But instead of building on her newfound success, she slipped away, leaving a cloud of questions in her wake. At first, the fear was that something terrible had happened. London police launched an investigation, combing through possible sightings and speaking with event officials, but no trace of her surfaced. There was no indication of foul play, no clues left behind, and no immediate explanation for why she would walk away from the life she had worked so hard to build. Speculation soon shifted toward the possibility that Mamie had intentionally left the event to seek asylum. Athletes from nations facing hardship have, in the past, used international competitions as opportunities to begin new lives abroad. If this was her intention, she never followed through with the formal steps to request asylum. Her name never appeared in immigration records, and she never came forward to confirm her intentions. To those watching closely, it seemed she had disappeared entirely, with no footprint left in either the sporting world or in official documents. For her family and friends in Sierra Leone, the mystery was heartbreaking. Her manager expressed deep sadness, emphasizing that Mamie had not even realized how talented she truly was. The London performance was a glimpse into a future filled with promise, yet that promise was cut short before it could bloom. Fellow Sierra Leonean runners lamented her absence, noting that her return would have secured her career and given her opportunities she could never have imagined at home. Without her presence, the dream of continuing as a professional runner was over. There was a brief flicker of hope when a report suggested that Mamie had been located safe and well. However, that news was quickly retracted, leaving those who loved her back at the starting point, filled with uncertainty and grief. In Sierra Leone, her disappearance cast a shadow over the running community. It was not simply the loss of an athlete, but the loss of a symbol of potential. She represented the possibility that, even from a small nation with limited infrastructure, a young woman could compete with the best in the world. To this day, Mamie Connor Lahun has never been found. Her disappearance remains a haunting reminder of how fleeting moments of triumph can be. The mysterious intruder. In March 2025, Natalia Komenko, a traveler from abroad exploring Japan on her own, found herself in a situation that was as chilling as it was surreal. While staying at a hotel in Tokyo, she returned to her room expecting a quiet night of rest. Yet, moments after lying down, she felt an overwhelming sense of unease. The air carried a strange scent, which she later described as resembling that of a decayed animal, oddly mixed with something sweet. At first, Natalia brushed off her discomfort, even joking to herself about the absurd idea of someone hiding under the bed. Still, curiosity got the better of her. Leaning over the mattress to take a look, she was met with a pair of wide, blinking eyes staring back at her from the darkness. To her horror, a man emerged from under the bed. The intruder positioned himself between Natalia and the door, leaving her trapped. His body glistened with sweat, which explained the strange odor. Fear took over as she froze, her mind racing with dreadful possibilities. Her voice cracked as she screamed, shouting desperately for help. For a moment, both of them seemed caught in a shared frenzy. The man, too, began shouting as he locked eyes with her. The terrifying standoff ended abruptly when the intruder fled, bolting from the room as other guests rushed to investigate the commotion. Though shaken, Natalia was physically unharmed. The unsettling encounter remains a frightening reminder of how vulnerable travelers can be, even in seemingly safe environments. Her story spread widely, not only for its bizarre nature, but also for the eerie details that made it feel like something out of a nightmare. The vanishing of Juan Pedro Martinez. On the morning of the 25th of June, 1986, a tragedy unfolded on the winding roads of Spain's Somosierra mountain pass that would give rise to one of Europe's most haunting mysteries. A tanker truck carrying over 5,000 gallons of pure sulfuric acid overturned, taking the lives of its driver, Andres Martinez, and his wife, Carmen. Yet amid the devastation, the most perplexing element of all was the unexplained disappearance of their 10-year-old son, Juan Pedro. Known later as the boy from Somosierra, his case would capture international attention and remain unsolved decades later. Juan Pedro was born on the 1st of January, 1976, the only child of Andres and Carmen. Growing up in Murcia, in southeastern Spain, he was remembered as a bright boy who loved reading and displayed a natural curiosity about the world. When he completed his school year with excellent grades, his father rewarded him with the chance to join a long-haul journey north. For Juan Pedro, the trip represented an adventure. He told family he was eager to see the green pastures and the cows that make milk. Carmen accompanied them both to help keep an eye on her son during the long drive. Andres was tasked with transporting a tanker filled with sulfuric acid to the city of Bilbao, a trip requiring careful navigation of treacherous mountain roads. Early on the morning of the 25th of June, the family stopped at a roadside restaurant for breakfast. Witnesses there remembered them clearly, especially Juan Pedro, who was dressed entirely in red. Nothing seemed unusual, and the family continued their journey an hour later. At approximately 6:30 in the morning, the tanker overturned in the Somosierra Pass. Emergency personnel arrived to find Andres and Carmen inside the cab, their bodies already damaged further by the spilled acid. The wreckage revealed scattered belongings, cassette tapes, clothing, and fragments of the journey. What rescuers did not initially realize was that a child had been traveling with them. When family members were later contacted with the devastating news, they immediately asked about Juan Pedro. Only then did authorities become aware that he was missing. A large-scale search began. Horses, dogs, motorbikes, and helicopters combed the area surrounding the crash site, yet no trace of Juan Pedro was found. The theory that his small body may have been dissolved by the acid was raised, but experts quickly dismissed it. Complete dissolution would have required total submersion for a prolonged period, conditions that were not present, especially as emergency services arrived so quickly. This left the mystery intact. How could a child vanish so completely? Soon, disturbing details emerged. Eyewitnesses claimed that shortly after the crash, a white Nissan Vanette stopped at the scene. Inside were an older woman who identified herself as a nurse and a male companion. According to reports, the pair sifted through the wreckage and emerged with a bundle they placed inside their van before driving away. Despite efforts to track down the vehicle, police found nothing, even after investigating more than 3,000 similar vans. As investigators pressed further, another layer of strangeness came to light. Traces of illicit substances were discovered hidden in the tanker. Neither Andres nor Carmen had any history that connected them to such activity, yet relatives confided that Andres had recently been pressured by a local smuggling ring into carrying contraband alongside his legitimate cargo. This revelation raised the possibility that the crash and Juan Pedro's disappearance were tied not only to a tragic accident, but to something darker. The tachometer of the tanker revealed that Andres had made 12 abrupt stops within the final 8 miles before the crash, though he never left the motorway. The road was clear that morning, and the vehicle itself had no mechanical faults. Why Andres stopped so often remains unexplained. Just as strange was the fact that at the moment of the crash, the truck was traveling at 86 miles per hour, far faster than it should have been moving along such dangerous curves. One chilling theory emerged: Juan Pedro may have been taken during one of those unexplained stops. If Andres was forced to comply with traffickers and resisted, perhaps Juan Pedro was removed from the vehicle as leverage. Some investigators speculated that Andres may have been pursuing whoever took his child in a desperate attempt to catch up, leading to the reckless speed that caused the crash. Other accounts suggested that the mysterious pair in the white van might have been connected to Juan Pedro's fate. If they had indeed taken a bundle from the crash, was it possible that they had rescued him? Or was their involvement linked to the presence of illicit substances hidden in the tanker? These questions were never conclusively answered, and the pair was never identified. In the aftermath of the accident, reports of sightings of Juan Pedro filtered in from across Spain. One account placed him in Madrid in the company of an elderly blind woman. Others surfaced sporadically over the years, yet none were substantiated. Each lead raised hopes before fading away, leaving only grief and speculation. Interpol eventually listed Juan Pedro's disappearance as one of Europe's strangest unsolved missing persons cases. Despite the massive search, international attention, and decades of speculation, no resolution was ever reached. His family continued to live with unanswered questions. Had he been taken? Was he hidden away? Or had he met a fate that no one could confirm? The mystery endures in part because every explanation falters under scrutiny. The theory of dissolution by acid fails scientifically. The suggestion of rescue by strangers remains unverified. The possibility of involvement by criminal elements is plausible but unproven. The unexplained stops, the excessive speed, the vanishing witnesses, all create a puzzle that has defied resolution for nearly 4 decades. For many, the disappearance of Juan Pedro symbolizes the unsettling reality that even in an age of modern transportation and communication, an individual can vanish under extraordinary circumstances, leaving only fragments of evidence and endless speculation. His case is remembered in Spain not only as a family's personal tragedy, but as a national mystery that exposed hidden networks, shadowy figures, and the fragility of everyday safety. Decades later, the name of Juan Pedro Martinez is still spoken with a mixture of sorrow and disbelief. He should have been remembered as the curious boy who dreamed of green pastures and dairy cows, excited for a simple journey with his parents. Instead, he is remembered as the boy who disappeared from Somosierra, a mystery that endures despite every effort to solve it. His family never gave up hope, and even now, the possibility of answers remains alive. The disappearance of Juan Pedro remains one of the most haunting unsolved stories in modern European history. It is not just a tale of an accident, but of something far stranger. A boy who vanished in plain sight, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions that continue to echo through time. Police encounter the Enfield poltergeist. Ghost stories often take root in ancient castles, hotels, or historic buildings, but when they are said to unfold in ordinary family homes, they become far more unsettling. The Enfield poltergeist case is one such story. Beginning in August of 1977, in a modest council house in Brimsdown, Enfield, England, it drew worldwide attention and remains one of the most well-documented accounts of unexplained activity in a private residence. At the centre of it all was single mother Peggy Hodgson and her 4 children, Margaret, aged 13, Janet, aged 11, Johnny, aged 10, and Billy, aged 7. The strangeness began when Peggy's daughters insisted that furniture in their room was moving by itself. Like any parent, Peggy first assumed the children were playing tricks. But when she saw a heavy chest of drawers slide across the floor, resisting her attempts to push it back, her skepticism began to fade. Frightened, she sought help from her neighbours, who themselves heard the untraceable knocking sounds and witnessed disturbances in the house. Their alarm led to a call to the police, marking the beginning of an extraordinary chapter. When officers arrived at the Hodgson home, they too reported witnessing events that defied explanation. One officer gave an official statement describing how she saw a chair move several feet across the floor without anyone touching it. Others confirmed they heard loud knocking and banging that could not be pinned down to pipes, walls, or any natural source. For many, the police involvement elevated the case from a family's tale to an incident with official recognition. After the initial police visit, the disturbances grew more intense. Furniture and toys seemed to take flight, hurled by unseen forces. Janet, the second youngest child, became the central focus of the activity. On several occasions, she appeared to levitate from her bed in full view of her family, neighbours, and later researchers. Even more unsettling was her sudden ability to speak in a deep, gravelly voice that did not sound like her own. This voice identified itself as Bill, a previous resident of the house, and shared information that shocked investigators. It accurately described how Bill had passed away, suffering a hemorrhage while sitting in his living room chair. When researchers later tracked down Bill's son, he confirmed this detail, which lent credibility to Janet's strange utterances. The Enfield poltergeist case drew paranormal investigators from around the world, including respected members of the Society for Psychical Research. Many believed that the Hodgson family's experiences were genuine. Skeptics, however, argued that at least some of the incidents might have been exaggerated or staged, particularly by Janet. She was caught on 2 occasions trying to mimic phenomena, once bending a spoon and another time hiding a tape recorder. Some researchers also noticed her ability to mimic the mysterious voice, leading to speculation that she might have been faking it. Yet, these moments of trickery did not explain the full range of activity witnessed by multiple independent observers, including law enforcement, journalists, and neighbours. For police officers, trained to deal in facts and evidence, encountering such phenomena was unnerving. Their reports could not be easily dismissed, and their credibility lent weight to the Hodgsons' claims. They described objects moving without human contact, sounds without a source, and events that no amount of rational inspection could explain. For the Hodgson family, the police validation meant their ordeal was no longer brushed aside as imagination or childish mischief. The Enfield poltergeist story spread across newspapers and television, becoming one of the most famous paranormal cases of the 20th century. What made it so powerful was not simply the dramatic events, but the fact that they unfolded in the home of an ordinary family with ordinary surroundings and were witnessed by figures of authority such as police officers. For many, this suggested that such experiences could happen to anyone, anywhere, not just in crumbling castles or ancient abbeys. Even decades later, the case divides opinion. Some accept the events as genuine encounters with the unknown, pointing to the consistency of reports and the sheer number of witnesses. Others view it as a mixture of genuine mystery and youthful exaggeration. But what cannot be denied is that in the late summer of 1977, a family in Enfield called the police to their home, and those officers left with accounts of phenomena they could not explain. The Demon House. In November 2011, LaToya Ammons, her mother Rosa Campbell, and her 3 children moved into a modest rental home in Gary, Indiana. At first, the family was excited to begin a new chapter in their lives. However, they soon discovered that the house seemed to harbor an unseen presence that would bring them years of fear and distress. What began with small oddities quickly escalated into one of the most widely discussed cases of paranormal activity in modern times, later becoming known as the Indiana Demon House or the Ammons haunting case. The first unusual sign appeared in December of that year. Despite the freezing winter temperatures, the home became plagued with swarms of black flies. No matter how many times the family exterminated them, the flies returned in greater numbers, filling the windows and clinging to the walls. It was a bizarre and unsettling phenomenon that set the tone for what was to come. Soon after, Rosa Campbell began hearing heavy footsteps echoing through the house when no one else was there. She later reported seeing a dark, shadowy figure in the living room, its presence filling her with dread. By March 2012, the experiences intensified. One night, LaToya entered her daughter's room and was horrified to see the 12-year-old girl levitating above her bed in a trance-like state. Rosa rushed in, and both women began praying desperately until, as suddenly as it had begun, the girl floated back onto the mattress. When she awoke the next morning, she had no memory of what had happened. The children soon became the focus of much of the activity. Their personalities began to shift, and strange behaviors emerged. On one occasion, family members reported that one of the boys spoke in a deep voice that was not his own, his eyes rolling back unnaturally. Another time, staff at a local hospital observed disturbing behavior from the youngest child, who appeared to act as if overtaken by an unseen force. These incidents drew the attention of local authorities, including police officers, social workers, and even medical professionals, all of whom documented unusual occurrences surrounding the family. One police captain openly stated his belief that the house was haunted after personally visiting the home and experiencing strange malfunctions with his equipment and unexplained phenomena during the investigation. In an effort to help, the Catholic Church became involved. Father Michael Maginot was assigned to the case and performed a series of blessings and exorcisms, both on the house and on the Ammons family. He conducted 3 exorcisms in total, some in Latin and others in English. Despite his efforts, the disturbances continued to trouble the family, and eventually they were forced to leave the home for good. By the end of 2012, the Ammons family had relocated, leaving behind the property that had caused them such anguish. The story, however, did not end there. In 2014, paranormal investigator Zach Baggins purchased the house for $35,000 with the intention of documenting its dark history. He filmed a documentary entitled Demon House, chronicling the events and his own experiences within the property. The filming concluded in 2016, and shortly thereafter, Zach made the decision to demolish the house entirely. The film was eventually released in 2018, reigniting interest in the chilling case and ensuring that the legend of the Indiana Demon House would never be forgotten. The Ammons haunting remains one of the most compelling modern accounts of alleged supernatural activity. Witnessed by family members, neighbors, medical staff, police officers, and clergy, The case is remembered not only for the fear it instilled, but for the wide range of credible observers who confirmed the strange and disturbing events. For many, the Indiana Demon House stands as a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary places can conceal the most extraordinary and terrifying mysteries. The mysterious Mount Asahidake SOS incident. The Mount Asahidake SOS incident remains one of the most mysterious and unsettling cases in Japanese wilderness history. Occurring in the rugged terrain of Daisetsuzan National Park, Hokkaido, this strange event brought together a puzzling combination of disappearances, human remains, a desperate plea for help recorded on tape, and an inexplicable SOS sign made from massive tree trunks, all pointing toward a tragedy that still has unanswered questions, even decades later. On the afternoon of July 24, 1989, two Tokyo men who had been hiking the popular route from Mount Kurodake to Mount Asahidake went missing. The area is known for its harsh, uneven terrain, with dense underbrush and steep slopes. At some point during their hike, the two men became lost and veered off course, descending Mount Asahi toward the Chubetsu River. A search operation was launched by Hokkaido police using helicopters. During the aerial search, authorities spotted a massive SOS sign constructed from 19 birch trees, each approximately 5 meters in length, arranged clearly in the open. Shortly thereafter, the two hikers were rescued safely 2 to 3 kilometers north of the SOS sign. Initially, it was believed that they had created the sign themselves. However, when questioned, both men claimed they had no knowledge of it. This revelation led the police to believe that someone else had made the sign and might still be in distress. The next day, another helicopter search was launched in the surrounding area. What they discovered added an eerie twist to the story. Near the SOS sign, they found human bones that showed signs of having been damaged by animals. Some fractures on the bones appeared to have occurred before the individual had passed. Nearby, authorities found a shallow hole in the ground, just large enough for a person to lie in, containing a strange assortment of items. These included 4 cassette tapes, a tape recorder, a backpack, a human skull, various amulets, a pair of men's basketball shoes, 2 cameras, a notebook, and the driver's license of a man named Kenji Iwamura. Iwamura was a 25-year-old office worker from Konan in Aichi Prefecture who had disappeared on July 10, 1984, after embarking on a solo hike to Mount Asahidake. When Iwamura didn't return to work a week after his planned trip, his parents contacted the police. A search was conducted at the time, but no trace of him was found. It wasn't until 5 years later that any clue about his whereabouts emerged. With the discovery of the bones, a cassette tape, and his personal belongings, investigators began to piece together the disturbing possibility that Iwamura had been the one who had constructed the SOS sign. However, this led to further confusion. An initial analysis of the bones suggested they belonged to a woman between the ages of 20 and 40. This finding introduced the possibility that a third person had been in the area, despite there being no records of a missing woman in Asahidake around that time. Investigators were forced to consider the theory that Iwamura may not have been alone. Further complicating the matter, one of the cassette tapes contained a recording of a man desperately calling for help. In the tape, a young man's voice could be heard yelling for 2 minutes, crying out for rescue from a cliff where he had become stuck. He referenced the place where he had previously seen a helicopter and shouted that he could not move due to deep underbrush. The rest of the tapes featured theme songs from anime series like Macross and Magical Princess Minky Momo. Interestingly, one of the cassette cases had been made from a cut-out image of Magical Princess Minky Momo, further suggesting a youthful, creative presence in the wilderness. The tape raised even more questions. It was never confirmed whether the voice belonged to Iwamura. Although acquaintances confirmed that he had carried similar cassette tapes and wore the same size basketball shoes as those found at the site, his parents were unable to verify whether the recorded voice was indeed his. Another point of confusion came from the SOS sign itself. The sign, which was clearly visible in aerial photographs dating back to September 1987, appeared to have been constructed with great effort. Investigators believed it would have taken at least 2 full days and considerable strength to move and arrange the birch logs. However, autopsy reports indicated that the individual whose remains were found was in poor physical condition at the time. so much so that it seemed improbable he could have managed to create the sign alone. Adding to the mystery, no cutting tool or axe was ever found in the vicinity, and no witnesses ever came forward to say they had seen Iwamura or anyone else building the sign. The area where the incident occurred is infamously difficult to navigate. A rock formation on Mount Asahi known as Kinko Iwa, or Safe Rock, is used as a navigation landmark. But a nearby similar rock known as Nise Kinko Iwa, or Fake Safe Rock, often misleads hikers. Those who fall from the latter can end up trapped in an unforgiving area filled with deep sasa grass and steep cliffs. This region is believed to be the exact place where the SOS sign was constructed and where Iwamura's remains were eventually found. In fact, shortly after the discovery, a media team attempting to film a report on the location had to be rescued themselves after becoming trapped. Eventually, on February 28, 1990, authorities revised their original analysis and confirmed that the skeletal remains were, in fact, male. This brought closure to the earlier theory that an unidentified woman had also perished in the area. Still, many questions remain. Was Iwamura truly alone? Did he build the SOS sign before becoming too weak to survive? And was the voice on the recording his final message to the world, or simply a desperate, unintentional cry caught on tape? To this day, the mystery of who created the SOS sign, how it was constructed, and the exact circumstances surrounding Kenji Iwamura's tragic fate remain unsolved. The Mount Asahidake SOS incident continues to intrigue and disturb those who study wilderness survival, missing persons cases, and unexplained events. It stands as a chilling reminder of the dangers of isolation in the mountains and the haunting gaps that can remain even after discoveries are made. The mysterious case of Francisca Cadenas Marquez. The disappearance of Francisca Cadenas Marquez remains one of the most haunting and unexplained mysteries in recent Spanish history. A quiet and deeply unsettling event, it shook the small, close-knit town of Hornacos in the region of Extremadura to its core. On the night of May 9, 2017, Francisca, a devoted wife and mother of two, vanished in less than a minute while walking a mere 50 meters down a well-lit alleyway. The sudden and total absence of any physical evidence has left investigators and her family puzzled for years. Born on November 13, 1957, Francisca had lived her entire life in Hornacos, a town of just 3,500 people. She was known as a reserved yet warm person, trusted and liked by her neighbors. Her life revolved around her family. She did not use social media, had no connections outside her hometown, and led what most would consider an ordinary life. She lived with her husband, a local farmer, and their two sons in a modest home in the heart of the town. On the night of her disappearance, Francisca had been caring for the 3-year-old daughter of a friend. When the child's parents came to pick her up around 11:15 in the evening, Francisca stepped outside to say goodbye, walking with them toward their car. Although their car was parked on a different street, it was connected to her home by a short alleyway, illuminated by functioning streetlights. Before parting, Francisca assured her family she would return in just a few minutes to prepare dinner. The last confirmed sighting of her came as her friends watched her from their rearview mirror, entering the alleyway. Simultaneously, her son, who had stayed behind at home, began to grow uneasy when she did not return. After just minutes passed, he contacted the family she had just seen to ask if perhaps she had decided to leave with them. When he learned she had not, he raised the alarm immediately. What followed was one of the fastest mobilizations of a missing person case in the region. Within 10 minutes, police were informed and search parties were organized. The alleyway was thoroughly examined, but investigators found no signs of a struggle or any evidence pointing to a voluntary disappearance. Her personal belongings, phone, wallet, medication, were all left behind at home. She was last seen wearing casual clothes, black leggings, a pink short-sleeved t-shirt, and black Nike sneakers. Search efforts became exhaustive. Police scoured nearby wells with cameras, over 50 in total, in case she had somehow fallen into one. Sniffer dogs searched the nearby mountains and swamps. Helicopters were brought in to sweep the surrounding countryside. If a house was abandoned, it was entered and checked. In homes with willing residents, thorough searches were conducted, and despite every effort, not a single trace of Francisca was found. Authorities quickly ruled out the idea of her becoming lost. She was familiar with the area, and the alleyway she disappeared in was both short and straightforward. The working theory became one of foul play, likely carried out by someone with intimate knowledge of the area. However, with no surveillance cameras in the alley and no eyewitnesses beyond those who saw her entering the pathway, identifying a suspect proved difficult. The last person to see Francisca was a 33-year-old seasonal worker, originally from the Dominican Republic. He was heading to his car and greeted her casually as they passed each other. She returned the greeting and continued toward her home. Based on where this brief exchange took place, she would have needed only about 20 more steps to reach her front door. Due to the timing and the fact that he was the final person to see her, police investigated the man closely. His criminal record drew further attention. However, multiple witnesses placed him at a local bar shortly after the encounter, and his alibi was considered solid. Still, rumors circulated throughout the town, with unfounded claims labeling him with everything from criminal activity to extremist affiliations. The harassment became so severe that he eventually relocated. By 2019, with no leads, no suspects, and no further evidence, the case was closed. But in 2024, the Unidad Central Operativa, known for solving other difficult cases in the region, reopened the investigation. The move brought renewed hope to Francisca's family. The Unidad Central Operativa had previously succeeded in solving the disappearance of Manuela Chavero, whose case shared similar regional and circumstantial elements. That success inspired the belief that they might be able to do the same for Francisca. An anonymous tip line was established with the cooperation of the family and authorities. The hope is that time may have softened the fear or reluctance of any potential witnesses who might now feel safe enough to share information. Even the smallest lead could help bring closure to a mystery that has haunted the people of Hornacos for years. To this day, the sudden and unexplained vanishing of Francisca Cadenas Marquez remains unsolved. Her family continues to wait, holding on to hope that answers will one day come. Paul Michael Lemaitre disappears in the middle of a crowd. On the 4th of July, back in 2012, in the small town of Seward, Alaska, the 97th annual marathon race, known as Mount Marathon, was well underway when one of the runners, a man by the name of Paul Michael Lemaitre, appeared to have suddenly vanished while standing out in the middle of a crowd of fellow runners. Regarded as one of the most bizarre and unexplainable disappearances of Alaska, Mount Marathon officials have been struggling to answer the cause of the disappearance of Paul Lemaitre and how it would have been possible for one of the most experienced runners to have vanished while taking a routine exercise through a familiar area. According to the Missing 411 report, Paul Michael Lemaitre was 66 years old at the time of his disappearance and was considered to be one of the most experienced runners of the event. Even more peculiar, the Mount Marathon race is considered to be one of the oldest and most safe races across the United States, with the marathon first beginning back in 1915 without a single known injury or disappearance in the 97 years since its conception. The marathon is described as being a 3-mile combination run that takes runners up Seward, Alaska's highest point of elevation of 3,000 feet, before coming back down to the base of elevation at sea level. The starting point for the race begins within downtown of Seward, located at the corner of 4th Avenue and Adams Street, winds up to the nearby mountain summit, and winds back down to end at the corner of 4th Avenue and Washington Street. After spending the entire year preparing for the race, Paul told his family that he had planned on taking his time with the race, hoping only to get a respectable time in placing, and not concerning himself with racing against the other runners and possibly hurting himself. Considering the fact that Paul was described as being incredibly physically fit by his co-workers at the military joint base Elmendorf-Richardson, it seemed trivial to his family that he would be able to finish the race with a solid time. Additionally, the fact that Paul worked as a counselor at the military base focused on helping guys leaving the military reintegrate into civilian life, assisting with health, and preparing for every possible problem they might occur, helps to demonstrate that Paul Lemaitre was known for being thoroughly prepared for any situation he may have found himself in, as well as the fact that had he been suffering from anything, he would have received the proper help he needed. Unfortunately for Paul, shortly after registering for the Mount Marathon race and receiving his bib number 548, Any sign of him would completely disappear off of the face of the earth only a few hours after the race began. According to the official search and rescue timeline, it was at around 3 in the afternoon that Paul's family claimed to have last seen him as he was standing at the starting line when the race began. Several hours later, sometime around 6 in the evening, an official race timing crew had spotted Paul ascending the mountain and decided to do a short interview with him to be used in the article for the race later in the day. Given the fact that he appeared to have been in great shape and quite talkative, the lead timer asked Paul several questions concerning the difficulty of the race and how he felt. Paul, without hesitation, stated that he was feeling great and was hoping to finish the race in the next few hours at a brisk walking pace. 5 days later, on the 9th of July, the officials at the race would publish the following article surrounding the encounter. According to the chamber, a race timing crew stationed at the top of the mountain began its descent about 5:45 in the afternoon. The lead timer, who was not named in the statement, spoke with Paul at about 6 when he was nearing the mountaintop. The timer had reported that Mr. Lemaitre verbally confirmed that he wanted to continue. After reviewing the segment, it was believed that Paul was the last runner to reach the mountain and should have been within view of a group of other runners and officials watching over the race. Several minutes after Paul was last seen by the race timing crew, a bizarre accident would take place on the descent of the mountain trail, though few details surrounding the event are known. According to official reports, 2 runners had fallen in an area that caused them to have suffered from serious injuries, though the extent of the injuries are not known. Worried about losing their proud history of maintaining one of the safest races, the Chamber of Commerce of Seward immediately began investigating the area, but were unable to find a sufficient answer for why the runners bizarrely turned off into a random area and seemed to have jumped from a mountain's ledge. The 2 runners, having suffered injuries at 2 separate locations in 2 separate incidents, were unable to remember why they had fallen in the given areas. It was at around 8 in the evening when Paul's wife contacted the race officials and let them know that Paul had not come back from the run and was expected to be the only runner left on the trail. She then explained that Paul had been expected to finish the race at around 7:30 in the evening and was running more than 30 minutes later than his expected finishing time. Due to the strange nature of the previous runner's injuries, the race officials did not hesitate another moment and contacted the Seward Fire Department and the Alaska State Troopers to begin an immediate search of the mountain to locate Paul and return him safely to his family. Oddly enough, despite several hundred volunteers working over the course of the next several hours, checking every pathway of the mountain, the teams were unable to locate any sign of Paul. Even after employing the use of helicopters equipped with special thermal imaging and state-of-the-art cameras, no new discoveries were made. Oddly enough, the search teams claimed that as soon as they were dispatched in the area, a sudden heavy fog blanketed the entire mountain. Throughout their search, the teams came across 2 black bears that ran away at the sound of people, but no other form of wildlife was seen in the area. After a team of search and rescue dogs were following Paul's scent, but then suddenly seemed to lose it halfway down the mountain, search and rescue efforts were strained beyond their limits, and no new ideas to help recover Paul were available. On the 9th of July, back in 2012, the local newspaper, the Alaska Dispatch, ran an article that described the search efforts with the following paragraph. Hundreds of volunteers have been involved in the rescue operation, including the Alaska Mountain Rescue, Nordic Ski Patrol, Alaska Search and Rescue Dogs, Bear Creek Volunteer Fire Department, National Park Service, Seward Police and Fire Department, the Air National Guard, Alaska State Troopers, and many Seward residents, as well as racers who returned to Seward to help with the search. No sign of Paul Michael was found over the week's search, and to this day, no one knows what could have happened to the runner. The official explanation behind Paul's disappearance claims that as Paul was ascending the mountain late into the night, his poor eyesight may have caused him to confuse the running pathway with a previous year's running pathway, as the Mount Marathon race was known for changing its paths every year to provide veterans with a new challenge, and could have caused him to have run off the side of the mountain in an area where his body has yet to be found. A mysterious collection of emails have been leaked, revealing the United States are asking for the Resurrection Chamber of Gilgamesh. A mysterious leak involving a collection of emails said to have been retrieved through a Freedom of Information Act request aimed at the US State Department has stirred intense speculation online. These emails reportedly contained an unusual inquiry, one that referenced the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the legendary Sumerian ruler, along with information regarding the location of his remains and the resting places of the Nephilim, beings described in ancient texts as giants or divine hybrids. The documents quickly gained attention across social media platforms and alternative news outlets, captivating people around the world. Many were drawn in by the idea that the US government might be in possession of knowledge or evidence tied to ancient legends, relics, or technologies that could dramatically alter our understanding of human history. For many, the suggestion that such topics were discussed within government circles validated long-standing theories about hidden knowledge and classified research into humanity's forgotten past. The name Gilgamesh alone, coupled with references to the Nephilim, was enough to spark a flurry of interest from researchers. The group known as Anonymous, which has become widely recognized for exposing secretive operations and uncovering sensitive material, is often associated with political transparency or revealing corporate misconduct. But in December of 2018, this alleged release was unlike their typical content. Instead of focusing on modern-day wrongdoing, the leaked material dove deep into the realms of ancient lore and unexplained phenomena. One email in particular, said to be part of the released cache, included a request from an undisclosed party seeking files related to a supposed resurrection chamber associated with Gilgamesh. The ancient hero, whose story is recorded in the Epic of Gilgamesh, is considered one of the oldest literary figures in history. According to the mythology of ancient Mesopotamia, Gilgamesh was part divine and part human, and his tale centers around quests for immortality and divine wisdom. Though historians generally accept that a historical king named Gilgamesh may have once ruled over the city-state of Uruk, the notion of a resurrection chamber tied to his name ventures far beyond accepted academic thought. Such a concept does not appear in any known Sumerian or Babylonian texts, nor has archaeological evidence been uncovered to suggest that such a chamber ever existed. Nevertheless, the theory is particularly compelling to those who believe that ancient civilizations may have wielded knowledge or tools far beyond what is currently acknowledged by science. Adding another layer to the mystery was the mention of the Nephilim. These beings are most famously mentioned in the Book of Genesis, where they are described as the offspring of divine beings and human women. Many interpretations suggest they were giants, while others consider them to be spiritually unique entities whose origins remain unclear. For centuries, theologians and historians have debated their meaning, while some theorists have proposed that they played a role in constructing ancient structures or had access to lost knowledge. Rumors have persisted that German archaeologists once believed they had located the tomb of Gilgamesh, and not long after, military operations took place in the region. Following the Iraq invasion, the US reportedly established a presence in the ancient city of Babylon, with speculation that they were not just there for strategic purposes, but also to secure ancient artifacts. Reports emerged that significant relics were taken, buildings were constructed within the historical site, and helicopter pads were installed, raising questions about the true nature of the mission. The reference to the Nephilim in the leaked communication gave rise to even more speculation. Some believe these beings were part of a hybrid lineage that predates recorded history, and that their burial sites may contain remnants of technology or wisdom from a forgotten age. If the US government was indeed searching for or researching these locations, it could suggest that there is far more to the human story than what is currently taught. The involvement of the State Department, if accurate, raises deeper questions. Some have theorized that such emails could be tied to confidential research initiatives involving ancient civilizations, or possibly even programs dedicated to locating and examining long-lost artifacts. Others suggest that these inquiries could be linked to ongoing efforts to uncover ancient technologies capable of transforming contemporary scientific understanding. For believers in suppressed history and classified discoveries, the leak represented a form of vindication. The idea that powerful institutions may possess evidence of long-forgotten chapters in human history, hidden relics, or even encounters with otherworldly entities has been a central claim within communities for decades. The content of the email aligned with these beliefs and reignited conversations that had long existed on the periphery of mainstream discourse. The mysterious note and vanishing of Granger Taylor. Granger Taylor was an eccentric yet brilliant Canadian mechanic whose mysterious disappearance in 1980 has remained one of the most curious and haunting unsolved cases in Canadian history. Known for his mechanical genius and deep fascination with space and extraterrestrial life, Taylor was both admired and misunderstood by those who knew him. Living in the small town of Duncan, British Columbia, he had built a reputation for his unusual lifestyle and extraordinary talents. But when he vanished without a trace, leaving behind a cryptic note that hinted at interstellar travel, his story took on an almost mythic quality. Taylor's note, which was found in his workshop shortly after his disappearance, suggested that he had left Earth voluntarily. He claimed that recurring dreams had promised him a 42-month journey aboard an alien spacecraft to explore the universe, and he declared that he would return once that voyage was complete. In the message, he explained that he no longer required his earthly possessions and instructed his family to follow the guidance in his will. This startling letter, combined with his previous claims of communicating with beings from beyond, set off a storm of speculation about his fate. Those closest to Taylor were deeply puzzled. While some considered the possibility that he had staged an elaborate disappearance to pursue a life elsewhere, others believed something far more extraordinary had occurred. Granger Taylor had long expressed a belief in the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence and had even constructed what he called a spaceship on his family's property. Although it was non-functional, it was a physical symbol of his intense curiosity and vision. Friends said he had been experimenting with radios and transceivers, claiming to have received signals or messages from advanced beings. He spoke about space as though it were not just a dream, but a destination. On the night he disappeared, something unusual did take place. Local residents reported hearing a loud bang, and some even claimed to have seen strange lights in the sky. While skeptics dismissed the lights as lightning from a severe storm that occurred that evening, others questioned whether they could have been part of the encounter Taylor believed was coming. He had previously told friends, including his close companion Keller, that if contact with advanced life occurred, it might happen during bad weather as cover. The coincidence of these phenomena on the same night he vanished only deepened the mystery. Taylor's connection to dynamite also fueled speculation. He had access to explosives, and some theories suggest that the loud bang might have been an explosion. However, those who knew him well insisted that he was highly knowledgeable and careful with such materials. They argued it was extremely unlikely he would mishandle them or do anything reckless. Keller, who had worked with Taylor on various mechanical projects including the spaceship on his farm, described him as intelligent, practical, and grounded. Despite his otherworldly beliefs, Taylor was not regarded by those close to him as someone who acted irrationally or impulsively. Keller and his family were among the last to see Taylor before his disappearance. In hindsight, Keller said there was nothing to suggest his friend was preparing to leave permanently, or that he was in any distress. The note, the absence of any clear trace, and the circumstances of that stormy night have left an enduring sense of ambiguity. What seemed like fantasy to some was entirely real to Granger Taylor. In the years since, his story has become a cultural touchstone. For some, Taylor represents a tragic figure whose longing to connect with something greater led him down an uncertain path. For others, he is remembered as a dreamer and visionary, someone whose mind reached far beyond the boundaries of the world around him. Whether he ventured into the wilderness and met an unfortunate fate, or whether something more mysterious happened, remains unknown. Granger Taylor's disappearance is not just a case of a missing person, it's a story that touches on larger questions about human curiosity, belief, and the unknown. His fascination with the stars, his tireless tinkering, and his final message left behind a legacy that still sparks imaginations today. In an age where so many seek to explain the unexplained, his story remains a powerful reminder that there are still mysteries we may never fully understand. The mystery of Paige Renkoski. The mysterious disappearance of Paige Renkoski remains one of Michigan's most enduring unsolved cases. On May 24, 1990, the 30-year-old substitute teacher and nanny had a full, yet routine day planned. It began with her driving her mother, Ardis Renkoski, to Detroit Metro Airport for a flight to Atlanta to visit her other daughters. Paige's day continued with a visit to a friend in Canton, Michigan, where she spent some time chatting about her fiancé, Steve, and her plans to watch his softball game later that evening. It was the Thursday before Memorial Day weekend, and Paige, like many others, was excited about the holiday ahead. After leaving her friend's home around 2:30 in the afternoon, Paige stopped at a local party store. There, she bought a 40-ounce beer and had a pleasant exchange with the store clerk, who later recalled their conversation thanks to Paige's distinctive beaded necklace. This detail would later help investigators construct a timeline of her final known movements. After the brief stop, Paige got back into her car, a silver 1986 Oldsmobile Cutlass Calais, and poured some of the beer into a fast food cup. With the bottle secured, she resumed her drive west toward the Okemos area where she lived. Paige made another stop roughly 30 minutes into her trip, this time at a rest area along the I-96 corridor. A witness later reported seeing her there, noting she had a short and neutral interaction with a man. There was no indication that anything was amiss at that point. However, shortly afterward, at approximately 3:30 to 3:40 in the afternoon, Paige pulled her vehicle off the highway just about 100 yards from the Fowlerville exit. What happened next has been the subject of speculation and uncertainty for over 3 decades. Her car was found abandoned, still running, with her shoes and purse left inside. The fact that the engine was still on ruled out mechanical failure as a cause for her stopping. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Paige outside the vehicle. One said she was barefoot and possibly being guided toward a nearby burgundy minivan by a man who may have been black or Latino. Another witness, notably a law enforcement officer who happened to be driving by, said he saw a man standing in front of Paige's vehicle with an outstretched arm, possibly showing a badge. The officer's initial impression was that the man might have been an off-duty or plainclothes police officer, which added a puzzling dimension to the already strange scene. Between 4:15 and 4:30, Paige had vanished. A Livingston County Sheriff's deputy later encountered her still-running car and marked it as abandoned. It is unclear whether the deputy noticed her personal belongings inside the car at that time, but his report confirmed that the vehicle showed no signs of distress or malfunction. Despite the quick appearance of law enforcement at the scene, Paige was already gone. In the years following her disappearance, extensive investigations have failed to uncover conclusive answers. Her financial accounts remained untouched, and no credible sightings were ever confirmed. Numerous tips over the years have led to searches and even excavations, but none have resulted in a breakthrough. One significant dig, fueled by a promising tip, brought hope to her family and community, but ultimately yielded no results. The mystery deepened with each passing year. Throughout the investigation, her fiancé, Steve, has been thoroughly ruled out as a suspect. His alibi and cooperation with authorities have been consistent, and he has remained in contact with Paige's family over the years. He is not considered a person of interest in the case. Despite the heartbreak, Paige's loved ones have clung to hope, continuing to seek answers and urging the public to come forward with any information that might help bring her home. Paige Renkowski was described as a caring and dependable woman with a bright smile and compassionate nature. She had blonde hair, blue eyes, and a calm, confident demeanor. Notably, she had a medical history that would make her remains easy to identify. One knee had been surgically replaced, and the other contained 2 metal screws, distinguishing features that continue to be noted in missing persons databases. Now, more than 30 years later, her disappearance remains a haunting mystery. The combination of eyewitness accounts, the peculiar scene with a still-running car, and the absence of evidence has left investigators and her family searching for answers that have yet to come. Each year, around the anniversary of her disappearance, her name resurfaces in the media as a reminder that someone, somewhere, may know the truth. Her case continues to be investigated by the Michigan State Police and is featured in various databases and forums in the hope that one day, a new lead will finally solve the mystery of what happened to Paige Renkowski. The mystery of Dr. Itzhak Bentov. Dr. Itzhak Bentov was a brilliant and unconventional thinker whose work continues to intrigue both scientists and spiritual seekers alike. He joined the scientific division of the Israeli military, contributing to the development of the country's first rocket, despite having no formal training in science. Later in life, he immigrated to the United States, where he invented a steerable cardiac catheter used in medical procedures. His innovative thinking extended far beyond the physical sciences, however, as he became deeply involved in researching the nature of human consciousness. Bentov's primary philosophical and scientific contribution was the idea that everything in the universe is vibrating. From the smallest atom to human beings, all forms of matter and energy operate on vibrational frequencies. He theorized that these vibrations not only construct the physical reality we experience, but are also closely tied to consciousness itself. This led to his model in which consciousness is not produced by the brain, but rather is something that the brain tunes into, like a radio receiving a signal that is already present in the universe. According to Bentov, at certain moments when vibrations temporarily cancel each other out, creating what is known as a node, reality undergoes a shift into a more refined, higher frequency state. During such moments, a person may momentarily become connected to an expanded layer of consciousness, something more universal or spiritual in nature. He believed these tiny gaps in physical reality were windows into something much larger. Bentov's ideas gained renewed attention through their inclusion in the now widely discussed Gateway Process, a declassified report from the US Army authored by Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonnell in 1983. This report attempted to explore how human consciousness could be trained to transcend time and space using a variety of methods such as meditation, hypnosis, and biofeedback. McDonnell drew upon Bentov's concepts to provide a scientific explanation for how vibrational coherence in the body and brain could lead to altered states of awareness. Bentov's work helped frame the theoretical foundation that allowed researchers to consider how consciousness could interact with non-local reality. One of Bentov's most intriguing ideas was that the universe functions like a hologram, meaning every part of it reflects the whole. This concept implies that each person carries within them the blueprint of the entire cosmos. This idea is echoed in both ancient spiritual traditions and emerging theories in quantum physics. In Bentov's view, understanding consciousness required a shift in perspective, not as something generated internally by the brain, but as something external and universal that individuals could access through vibrational tuning. He argued that the human nervous system plays a central role in bridging physical reality with higher dimensions of consciousness. Through meditative practices, he found that people could synchronize their internal vibrations with universal frequencies, similar to how a radio tunes into a broadcast. One of his notable discoveries was the phenomenon of phase locking between the aorta and the heartbeat during deep meditation. Typically, these two rhythms are slightly out of sync, but during meditation, they align perfectly. This not only conserves energy, but also signifies a shift toward a more harmonious state of being. Bentov also examined the impact of subtle energy frequencies like infrasound and ultrasound on the human experience. Though inaudible to the conscious ear, these vibrations can influence perception and even lead to sensations that people sometimes interpret as spiritual or supernatural. He pointed out that the Earth itself resonates at around 7.5 Hz, a frequency known as the Schumann resonance, which closely matches the brainwave activity associated with meditation and altered states such as remote viewing. His ideas were not isolated. At the first International Conference on Psychotronic Research in 1973, several other scientists presented similar concepts, suggesting that human beings are capable of tapping into a universal field of energy. According to their collective view, intuitive insights and psychic phenomena are less about fantasy and more about learning how to access a natural part of the universe that modern science has yet to fully understand. Dr. Itzhak Bentov's life was tragically cut short in 1979 in an aviation accident. Despite his untimely passing, his work remains influential. His research continues to serve as a bridge between science and spirituality, offering a model of consciousness that sees the human mind as far more powerful than previously thought. His legacy is one of curiosity, exploration, and the relentless pursuit of understanding what it means to be aware in a universe of vibration. The strange case of Father John Vraniak. The disappearance of Father John Vraniak in 1923 remains one of the most baffling and unsettling unsolved cases in American ecclesiastical history. At just 28 years old, Vraniak was a devoted Catholic priest serving in Verdun, Illinois, who vanished without a trace during a seemingly routine trip to St. Louis. What began as an ordinary Monday for a young priest quickly turned into a nationwide mystery that would confound law enforcement, parishioners, and family for generations. John Vraniak was born in 1895 in Slovakia to Joseph and Johanna Vraniak. He was the second of 5 children, with one older brother, Adolf, and younger siblings Franco, Joseph, and Apollona. In 1907, the Vraniak family immigrated to the United States, settling first in Pennsylvania among a growing Slovakian community. By the 1910 census, they were living in West Pike Run, Pennsylvania. Though census documents listed the family as Hungarian immigrants, this reflected the political boundaries of the time, as Slovakia was then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. From an early age, John was deeply committed to his faith and education. He attended St. Procopius College, now known as Benedictine University, an institution focused on educating Czech and Slovak men. There, he served as editor of the college's publication, Studentski Listy, and demonstrated intellectual curiosity with writings such as an article titled Roosevelt and the Ape Man in Theory, although its content remains unclear due to language barriers. By 1917, he was ordained and assigned to his first parish as rector at Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Verden. He remained there for 6 years, gaining the respect and affection of his congregation. On March 5, 1923, Father Vraniak left for St. Louis, Missouri, an 85-mile journey from Verden. His plans were simple: purchase supplies for an upcoming church bazaar and visit 2 fellow priests to invite them to a church event. He intended to stop first at the home of Father V.F. Linek, pastor of Holy Trinity Slovak Catholic Church, but Linek was not home when John arrived. Leaving a note behind, John then made stops at Butler Brothers and Rice Sticks Dry Goods to complete his shopping. The last confirmed sighting of him was at 2:30 in the afternoon at the Butler Brothers store. He intended to stop in Mount Olive on his way back to visit Father Charles Naparek. What happened after that remains a mystery. At 12:15 on March 6th, John's car was found parked at Elm and Main Street in the business district of St. Louis near the Mississippi River. At the time, the vehicle was assumed to be abandoned by its owner, and police impounded it without suspecting foul play. When John failed to return home, concern quickly spread in Verden. He had told his mother, who lived with him, that he would be back that evening. His parishioners contacted St. Louis police, informing them that John rarely carried cash on such trips, instead charging purchases to the church. Once the police connected the vehicle to the missing priest, a more thorough investigation began. A garage owner in Venice, Illinois, a nearby town, confirmed that he had repaired John's car that Monday. This supported the belief that John had been in the area shortly before his disappearance. Despite widespread media attention and extensive searches, no trace of John was ever found. The contents of his car only deepened the mystery. It was a Buick Coupe. Inside, police found a few old papers and pamphlets, including a bill from the Catholic Art Association for a film titled The Victim. The film's plot eerily mirrored John's disappearance, telling the story of a priest who helps a struggling family only to be harmed by a criminal and left near a bridge. A return envelope to an insurance agency and various pamphlets were also discovered. Most curiously, the words "We won" were scratched into the back seat, and corn stalks and wheat were found on the undercarriage, suggesting the car had recently travelled through a rural area or field. Additionally, John's St. Christopher medal had been pried from where he had affixed it inside the car. John's family and community were devastated. His parishioners raised a $1,500 reward, equivalent to more than $26,000 today, and began organizing their own searches along the route from Verden to Venice. A friend of John's planned to escalate the matter to the Illinois Attorney General, though it's unclear whether that effort ever materialized. The investigation, however, was never able to produce definitive leads. Various theories have been proposed over the years. One early theory was that John had voluntarily disappeared, possibly leaving the priesthood. However, those who knew him, including Father Linek, firmly rejected that idea. They described him as deeply committed to his calling and joyful in his service to the church. Another rumor suggested that John had been attacked by individuals along the road, possibly criminals or opportunists. Father Naparek reported receiving an anonymous phone call alleging an assault, but the credibility of this claim is highly questionable, and some suspect it may have been a prank or fabrication. Perhaps the most disturbing theory involves a man named Andrew Rolando, who was already wanted for the death of another priest, Father Arthur Belknap. Rolando had reportedly expressed hostility toward Catholics, and was believed to have been in Verdun during the time of John's disappearance, possibly to visit a woman he had been corresponding with. While circumstantial, these facts suggest a potential link that was never fully explored. Even within John's own family, mystery and speculation abounded. His brother Joseph told newspapers that he had received word from John, claiming he was being held by an unnamed organization. Joseph refused to elaborate further, saying that the police chief had asked him to stay quiet. However, other reports contradicted this, suggesting that Joseph may not have received any such message at all. The conflicting accounts added another layer of confusion to an already puzzling case. More than a century later, the fate of Father John Vraniak remains unknown. His disappearance left a void in his community and unanswered questions that have never been resolved. Whether he was the victim of a targeted attack, a tragic accident, or something more sinister, his story continues to haunt those who remember his dedication, intellect, and quiet strength. The absence of closure has kept his name alive in historical records and among those who still wonder what became of the young priest who vanished in the city of St. Louis. What happened to Josh Gimond? The disappearance of Josh Gimond remains one of Minnesota's most haunting and perplexing mysteries. On the night of November 9, 2002, the 20-year-old college student vanished while walking a short distance back to his dorm at St. John's University in Collegeville, Minnesota. What should have been a routine 3-minute walk turned into an unsolved case that continues to confound investigators, his family, and the wider community more than 2 decades later. Josh Gimond was known for his intellect, ambition, and charisma. Born on June 18, 1982, in Redwood Falls, Minnesota, and raised in Maple Lake, he had already achieved considerable success by the time he entered college. A valedictorian and class president at Maple Lake High School, Gimond was driven by a clear sense of purpose. His peers voted him most likely to succeed, and his aspirations included attending Yale Law School and one day running for public office. At St. John's University, a private Catholic institution, he immersed himself in political science and law, serving as co-captain of the mock trial team and staying active in pre-law initiatives. By the fall of 2002, Gimond was living with 5 other students at the St. Maur House dorm, including his close friend Nick Hajdukovic. Though he had recently ended a relationship with his longtime girlfriend Katie Benson, they remained on good terms. That night, Gimond attended a low-key poker gathering at the Mettencourt dormitory, a short walk from his room. Surveillance logs show he entered his apartment at 6 minutes past 11 in the evening, before leaving again, heading to the party. He didn't bring his wallet, keys or glasses, items most people would take with them if planning to leave for an extended time. Reports from that evening indicate that he was in good spirits. Although he had been drinking, accounts differ on how affected he seemed. Some friends claimed he was coherent and composed, while others thought he appeared mildly intoxicated. At approximately 11:45, Gimond left the gathering without saying goodbye. About 15 minutes later, witnesses believe they saw someone matching his description walking across a bridge near Stumpf Lake, presumably on his way back to his dorm. When he didn't return to the party or respond to calls from friends, many assumed he had gone home and fallen asleep. It wasn't until the next day, when Gimond failed to attend a scheduled mock trial meeting, that concern set in. When his roommate confirmed that Josh hadn't been seen at the dorm, campus security was contacted. Initial investigations revealed unsettling signs. Gimond's car remained untouched in its parking spot, his personal items were in his room, and his television was still on. There had been no recent activity on his AOL Instant Messenger account, which was unusual for someone known to communicate regularly with friends online. The Stearns County Sheriff's Office soon took over the case and launched a broad search effort involving authorities, volunteers, and even the National Guard. The search focused on campus grounds and nearby lakes, with Stumpf Lake a primary focus due to the sighting near the bridge. Despite extensive searches, including sonar scans and dive teams, no physical evidence was recovered from the lake or its surroundings. One early theory was that Gimond may have accidentally fallen into the lake, especially if he had been disoriented. However, the lack of evidence supported no such conclusion. Speculation about his mental state also circulated, especially in light of his recent breakup. Yet friends and family stated he was emotionally stable, and had given no indication of wanting to leave his life behind. He was described as optimistic, forward-looking, and excited about his academic future. Rumors of interpersonal tension between Guimond and his roommate began to surface. After the breakup, Benson and Hajdukovic had reportedly explored a possible romantic relationship, though it never progressed beyond a kiss. This situation caused some discomfort for Guimond, and it was said that the two men argued the night before Josh disappeared. On the night in question, Benson claimed she was with Hajdukovic during the time of the disappearance. However, their timelines didn't perfectly align. Hajdukovic's key card records showed he returned to the dorm at 2:42 in the morning, while Benson believed she left him between 1 and 1:30, leaving a window of time unaccounted for. Although Hajdukovic spoke with investigators, he declined a polygraph test, which further fueled speculation, though no charges or direct evidence have ever implicated him. One of the most disturbing developments came later, when authorities closely examined Guimond's computer. After his disappearance, the room was not immediately secured, and someone had deleted files from his hard drive. Although it's unclear who accessed the computer, data recovery specialists were eventually able to retrieve some of the lost material. They found that Guimond had created several profiles on online dating platforms, such as Yahoo Personals, and had shown interest in topics like creating fake IDs. While not incriminating on their own, these findings broadened the scope of the investigation and raised questions about whether Guimond may have had private encounters or interactions unknown to his friends. Adding another layer of complexity, authorities received reports about a suspicious man driving an orange Pontiac Sunfire on campus around the time of Josh's disappearance. This individual was seen in areas known for discreet meetups and was reportedly dropping off other men. Although investigators eventually located the driver, he denied any involvement. Notably, he had his vehicle destroyed before it could be thoroughly searched, a detail that continues to disturb those following the case. Despite the passage of years, Josh Guimond's case remains unsolved. Numerous theories persist, from accidental misadventure to foul play, possibly involving people close to him or strangers with unknown motives. The lack of evidence, combined with conflicting timelines and unexplained actions, has made this case one of Minnesota's most unsettling cold cases. His family, along with advocacy groups and concerned citizens, continue to push for answers, hoping that new technology or a long-withheld clue may eventually bring clarity. For now, the story of Josh Guimond serves as a tragic reminder of how someone can vanish so quickly and completely, even in a tight-knit, familiar environment. His dreams, his plans, and his potential remain suspended in time, with those who knew him still searching for the truth. The mysterious disappearance of Isabella Dan. The mysterious disappearance of Isabella Dan has left investigators and the Markham community with far more questions than answers. A respected real estate lawyer and business owner, Isabella vanished in early March 2023 under circumstances that have yet to be fully explained. Her case continues to draw attention due to the complex intersection of her professional life, real estate dealings, and an eerie absence of personal ties in Canada. Isabella Dan was 53 years old when she was last seen. She operated her own law office in Markham, Ontario, and was known professionally among clients and colleagues for her legal expertise in real estate. Despite her active professional life, Isabella's personal life appeared more private. She had no known close family in Canada. Her parents lived in China, she was unmarried, had no children, and was not known to have many personal relationships outside her business connections. In August 2022, Isabella sold a property in North York for $2.75 million. She still held ownership of another home in the same area, purchased in 2020 for just over $1 million. That property was also tied to significant financial activity, including a second mortgage issued in 2021 and further lending that brought the total mortgage liability to nearly $1.5 million. It was also listed as a rental income property, adding another layer to the complexity of her financial portfolio. At the time of her disappearance, Isabella was facing 4 civil lawsuits in Ontario's Superior Court. These cases involved allegations of professional negligence relating to mortgage transactions on various properties across the Greater Toronto area. The lawsuits did not claim that Isabella had participated in or directly benefited from any mortgage fraud. but rather that she failed to meet certain legal duties, such as ensuring proper title insurance and advising clients appropriately. Isabella had filed statements denying the allegations, most recently in October 2022. By March 2023, none of the claims had been resolved, and the court had not determined her liability. Friends and acquaintances who had interacted with Isabella shortly before her disappearance described her as cheerful, energetic, and confident. One friend, who met her through a professional setting, recalled that Isabella appeared perfectly healthy and happy during their last meeting in the fall of 2022. Nothing seemed to suggest that anything was wrong in her life, personally or professionally, that might indicate an impending disappearance. On March 3, 2023, Isabella was last seen around 8:30 in the evening, entering a Porsche Cayenne outside a condo building located at Waterwalk Drive and Vauclair Gate in Markham. Surveillance footage confirmed she got into the vehicle willingly, which belonged to a business associate. That individual later told authorities that he had dropped her off at an unknown location, where she was supposedly meeting someone else. Despite narrowing the possible drop-off areas to parts of Markham and Toronto, police have not been able to determine the exact location or identify the person she was meant to meet. Isabella's colleagues grew concerned when she missed appointments and failed to report to work. Soon after, she was reported missing. Her grey Land Rover, which she had leased for 4 years beginning in 2022, was discovered parked on a street near the condo building she was last seen at, but not in the building's designated underground garage. Inside her home, investigators found uneaten food and several personal items she would typically take with her, suggesting she did not plan to be away for long. Since the night she disappeared, there has been no financial or digital activity linked to her known bank accounts or phone. The complete silence only deepened the sense of unease. Police were also unable to find anyone who could speak to Isabella's life outside of her work. She seemed to lack personal contacts or a support network beyond her professional connections. On March 17th, a message from Isabella's brother in China was sent to the Law Society of Ontario in a desperate plea for help. He wrote that their family was deeply worried and in pain over her disappearance. His outreach reflected the growing concern from those closest to her, though distanced by geography. To this day, the disappearance of Isabella Dan remains unexplained. The combination of her legal entanglements, financial activities, and sudden vanishing with no communication has created an enduring mystery. Despite efforts by police, friends, and family, there has been no resolution. The absence of clear personal ties in Canada only makes the investigation more difficult, leaving the question of what happened to Isabella unanswered. As the case continues to unfold, many hope that renewed attention will eventually bring closure to those who knew her and unlock the truth behind her vanishing. The mystery of Dorothy Mae Rusnak-Kaler. The disappearance of Dorothy Mae Rusnak-Kaler, also known as Dottie, remains one of the most perplexing and unsettling missing persons cases in California's history. A deeply private woman with a quiet, thoughtful personality, Dottie was 41 years old when she vanished on June 12, 1985. She had been living in Concord, California with her husband, Jewel Kaler, at the time, and the story of her disappearance quickly spiraled into a case filled with contradictions, personal struggles, and haunting questions. Dottie grew up in Chardon, Ohio, and moved to Berkeley, California in 1964. She built a life for herself working as a secretary and was known for her love of books and her deeply introspective nature. She first met Jewel Kaler in 1970 under complicated circumstances. Jewel had been dating her roommate and was married with a daughter at the time. When Dottie discovered the truth, Jewel reassured her that he was pursuing a divorce. Despite the rocky start, Dottie continued the relationship. Eventually, Jewel did file for divorce, and the two married in 1975. The couple settled in Concord, where Jewel worked for the United States Forest Service as an entomologist and aerial photography specialist. Their marriage, however, was far from idyllic. Over time, Dottie became isolated, exacerbated by her agoraphobia, a condition that made it difficult for her to leave the house or be in public places. Jewel traveled frequently for work, often unreachable, which left Dottie alone much of the time. According to her friends and family, this isolation intensified her anxiety. As the years passed, Dottie grew increasingly suspicious of Jewel's long absences, She discovered evidence of extramarital affairs and wrote letters to several women he had been involved with, many of whom confirmed they had no idea he was married. Dottie kept meticulous records of her discoveries and confided in her support network, including new friends she made through a group called Women in Transition. These connections were vital to Dottie's emotional growth, and her loved ones believed she was beginning to reclaim her independence and strength. In 1984, Dottie quietly began taking steps toward leaving her marriage. She opened a post office box, created a personal bank account, applied for credit cards in her name, and sold a truck and trailer, placing the proceeds in a secure cashier's check. She stored financial and personal documents detailing Jules' affairs and alleged struggles in a locked file cabinet, which she asked a friend, Shelley Wilson, to keep for her. These moves painted a clear picture of a woman preparing to leave a troubled marriage. Despite years of emotional and, at times, physical turmoil, Dottie had begun to regain a sense of control. She joined a church, enrolled in college classes, and received therapy to address her agoraphobia. She had started taking pride in her appearance again and showed signs of emotional resilience that hadn't been present for years. She was preparing to stay in the Concord home as Jules planned a job-related move to Salt Lake City, Utah. On June 11, 1985, Dottie and Jules visited a mechanic together, during which they reportedly argued. This was the last time anyone besides Jules reported seeing her. According to Jules, he drove her to the Pleasant Hill BART station the next morning, where she was supposedly catching a train to visit a friend. He claimed she would return on June 24th, the same day he was set to leave for Utah. That was the last known sighting of Dottie. On June 13th, Jules returned home early from work and said he was surprised to see Dottie's Volkswagen parked next to his car at the Concord BART station. He found her purse inside the vehicle, containing nearly all of her essential belongings, including her ID, checkbook, medication, and wallet. The only item missing was her bee sting kit, which she carried at all times due to a severe allergy. Her overnight bag was also gone, and she was nowhere to be found. Rather than contacting the police right away, Jules took several puzzling steps. He moved her car multiple times to avoid parking tickets, left notes inside the vehicle, and placed her purse under the seat. On June 16th, he called a real estate agent to list their house for rent, and on June 19th, just 1 week after her disappearance, movers arrived to pack up everything, including Dottie's possessions. Dottie's sister Diane and Shelley were stunned. They questioned why Jules was clearing out her belongings when she was supposedly returning in just a few days. He offered no clear explanation. Even more troubling, Jules delayed filing a missing persons report until June 17th, 5 days after Dottie vanished. He initially claimed to have called her sister, but Diane later confirmed she learned of the disappearance from Shelley, not Jules. His accounts to investigators were inconsistent, and he refused multiple requests to take a polygraph. When questioned about discrepancies, he altered key details, including when he and Dottie supposedly washed her car. Dottie's friends and family do not believe she would have willingly disappeared. She had made clear plans for her future, secured finances for an independent life, and was re-establishing her identity after years of struggle. Leaving behind her purse, her car, and her beloved dog made no sense. Investigators, including private detectives hired by Diane, uncovered no evidence that she attempted to start a new life elsewhere. There were no financial transactions, no attempts to retrieve her $5,000 check, and no communication with her support group or family. While Jules continued to maintain his innocence, his behavior, both before and after Dottie's disappearance, raised concern. He expressed mixed emotions in his letters to her, pleading with her to return while blaming her for causing him hardship. His lack of urgency and failure to reach out to her friends and family in the immediate aftermath further deepened suspicion. The house was repainted, her things were removed, and he relocated to Utah shortly after. To this day, no conclusive evidence has emerged to confirm what happened to Dorothy Kaler. Despite exhaustive searches and investigations, her fate remains unknown. Her family and friends believe that Dottie was on the verge of a new beginning and would not have chosen to walk away from it all. They continue to hold out hope for answers, driven by love and a determination to honor her life and the courage she showed in her final months. Dorothy Kaler's disappearance is a chilling reminder of how fragile the line between freedom and fear can be. Her case remains open, and those who knew and loved her have never stopped seeking justice. as the years pass, the memory of Dottie lives on, not only in the hearts of those who remember her, but in the hope that the truth will one day come to light. The strange disappearance of Adam Hecht. The mysterious disappearance of Adam Hecht in 1989 remains one of the most baffling missing persons cases in California. At just 23 years old, Adam was the son of Harold Hecht Sr., a renowned Hollywood film producer. With a privileged background, a promising future, and a stable job as a tennis instructor in Beverly Hills, Adam's sudden and unexplained vanishing shocked his family and left a trail of unanswered questions. Adam was known as a thoughtful and compassionate young man, someone with a quiet demeanor and a kind heart. After graduating high school, he chose a simple and disciplined life, avoiding the spotlight despite his family's Hollywood connections. In the late 1980s, he was working as a tennis instructor and living independently in West Los Angeles. It was during this time that a seemingly random encounter would set into motion the strange events that would ultimately lead to his disappearance. On the morning of January 10, 1989, Adam and his brother, Harold Jr., went out for breakfast. Outside the restaurant, Adam noticed a homeless man and, without hesitation, left the table to speak with him. His brother, curious about the exchange, asked what the conversation was about, but Adam declined to explain. Later, after leaving the restaurant, Adam was seen again speaking to the same man, who was introduced as Tony. Within days, Adam invited Tony to move into his apartment, a decision that surprised and deeply concerned his family. Adam's sudden and intense bond with Tony puzzled his loved ones. He brought Tony to meet his mother, Martine, who was visibly unsettled by the man's behavior. Tony reportedly waved his hands over his food in a ritualistic gesture and acted in ways that made Martine uncomfortable. Despite her misgivings, Adam continued to spend more and more time with Tony. Their relationship grew, and they began frequenting areas like Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles, an area known for its harsh conditions and vulnerability to crime. During one of these outings, Adam severely burned his hand while taking part in a mysterious ritual with Tony, further alarming his family. On June 10, 1989, Harold visited Adam's apartment after not hearing from him for several days. When he arrived, he found Tony there, but Adam was nowhere to be seen. Tony claimed he didn't know where Adam had gone or when he would return. Concern deepened when Martine visited and was met with more disturbing behavior. Tony attempted to kiss her and insisted he was her son, prompting the family to have him removed from the apartment. By July, Adam was officially reported missing. Investigators looked into Tony's potential involvement in Adam's disappearance, but found no concrete evidence linking him to any wrongdoing. He maintained that he had no idea where Adam had gone. However, suspicion lingered, especially among Adam's family, who strongly believed that Tony was withholding information. Their concerns were compounded when, a month after Adam disappeared, his car was found abandoned on a Beverly Hills street. It was covered in parking tickets, suggesting it had been left there for an extended period. Inside the vehicle were Adam's keys, wallet, and jacket, indicating he had no intention of leaving for long or that he may not have left the car willingly. Despite these concerning signs, authorities considered the possibility that Adam had chosen to disappear voluntarily. With no evidence of foul play, no witnesses, and no solid leads, the investigation stalled. Still, Adam's family remained steadfast in their belief that something had happened to him against his will. They pointed to his compassionate nature and the influence of his relationship with Tony as possible factors in his vanishing. A year after Adam's disappearance, his brother Harold encountered Tony on the street and pressed him for information. Tony's response was cryptic. He told Harold that if he stayed on the streets long enough, he would find the answer. It was a vague and unsettling statement that offered no closure. To this day, Adam Hecht remains missing. His case continues to attract speculation and concern, with many believing that someone, perhaps Tony or someone from the streets of Los Angeles, knows more than they are willing to share. Adam's disappearance is a haunting reminder of how quickly a life can be altered by the unknown, and how deeply compassion and trust can lead someone into unforeseen danger. Over 3 decades later, the mystery endures, and Adam's family continues to search for answers in the hope that one day the truth will emerge.